Hello! As some of you may know, I really wanted to do a Pokemon Emerald Fire only hardcore Nuzlocke. But I don't feel like I'm ready enough to do that, so I decided to do a warm-up beforehand. So, welcome to the Psychic only Nuzlocke of Alpha Sapphire. Let's get the rules out of the way. Number 1. Any Pokemon that faints must be permaboxed. Number 2. I can only catch the first wild Pokemon encountered in each area. Number 3. No items during battles. Number 4. No overleveling. Number 5. I have to set the battle mode to set. And just for this game, I won't be able to use any Mega Evolutions. As for the starter, I'll have the choice to pick whichever starter I want because that will soon be replaced by a Ralts just before Petalburg. And on the screen now is all my possible encounters for this game. There's not too many of them, but it's still enough to make this challenge still fun. Before we continue with the video, apparently 93.2% that are watching right now are not subscribed. I'll be putting out more Nuzlockes and hopefully other challenge runs in the future, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications. Now that that's out of the way, here we go with the actual video. As we get through the intro and setup, we found ourselves locked in a moving truck, just arriving in Little Root Town. Once we stepped off the truck, we found ourselves insulted by our own mother. Afterwards, we met the neighbor, picked a mudkip, saved the professor, battled his daughter, and finally met our first Ralts. One of the reasons why I chose Alpha Sapphire for this run is so that I could utilize the super training function of the game, since I quite often find myself short on time. To EV train Ralts for special attack EVs would mean finding wild Ralts and killing 252 of them, and unfortunately that would take a bit too long. Also, I happen to really like this game. So, after completing the super training, we leveled Gardo and her subsequent successors to the level cap of 14 and began the massacre. At attempt number 7, the Ralts known as Enemy successfully set up 2 double team on the Geodude, taking out the Boulder Pokemon while only getting hit with 1 Rock Tomb. Then it was time for the run killer, the Nosepass. Enemy hit first with a Confusion which did a good chunk of damage. She managed to avoid the Rock Tomb the Nosepass tried to hit. The next Confusion took her foe's health down to orange and the Nosepass missed yet another Rock Tomb, meaning that this was the run. As I was cursing out the godforsaken blue rock thing, Enemy took it out with a final Confusion. Afterwards, I just sat for a bit, thinking that if I mess up and wipe in this run, I'll have to do this fight all over again. In any case, we set off to save Pico, meet Steven's dad, and set off to Dewford with Mr. Briney. We would then finally head off to Granite Cave in search for another team member. After about 10 minutes of encounters, an Abra finally showed up. Thankfully, the first Pokeball managed to catch it and Psycho joins the team. Psycho was super trained and we grinded for a bit. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to evolve it into a Kadabra in time for the Brawly fight, because Enemy was already at the level cap of 16. However, Brawly didn't prove to be much of a fight at all. His Machop was taken out in one hit by a Confusion as well as his Makuhita. Second gym done with a lot less trouble than the first one. With the level cap extended, I was able to train Psycho until she was able to evolve. She evolved into a Kadabra. Upon entering the mural room in Granite Cave, we were introduced to Steven, and the glue that holds us all together, the plot. We then ran more errands in Slateport, battled Team Aqua, and met an idol for a game mechanic that we'll never use. Then it was time for the infamous May battle at Route 110. I led with Psycho, who was able to take down May Shroomish with 2 Confusions. She would do the same for the Slugma, albeit getting hit by an Ember once. Her Marshtomp was then sent out, and I opted for another Confusion. It did decent damage, but the Marshtomp's Smut Shot hit a critical and sent Psycho's health to the red. I then switched to Enemy, who tanked a Mud Shot in the switch-in. Somehow, I forgot that Enemy had Magical Leaf and used Confusion instead. The Marshtomp hit the Mudslap first, taking Enemy's health to orange. After that, I remembered Magical Leaf existed and closed the fight pretty easily. In Mauville, there was the Wally fight next, but Psycho had a pretty easy time defeating his Ralts. And going by the chapter's title, I think most of you know what's coming. It was time for Watson. I led with Psycho, equipped with a Cherry Berry. Psycho opened with a Psybeam and managed to take the Magnemite's health down to orange. The Magnemite successfully hit a Thunder Wave, paralyzing Psycho. Not for long though, as Psycho swiftly healed herself with a Cherry Berry. One Psybeam later, the Magnemite was down and out. Watson sent out his Voltorb next, but it was taken out with one Psybeam. Then came his Magneton. Psycho managed to take down about a third of the Magneton's health with Psybeam, but was left confused after that Supersonic. I went for a confusion to avoid Watson healing his Magneton, but Psycho hit herself in her confusion. She was also hit by a Volt Switch, leaving her health in the red. At this point, there was no other way. I decided to sack Psycho and went for a Psybeam. If she can't hit the Psybeam, the run would probably end here. Thankfully, Psycho pulled off the attack and fired off one last Psybeam before kicking the bucket, and she managed to confuse the Magneton, which hurt itself in its confusion. I considered switching here, but ultimately decided to just hammer on with Psybeams. Psycho managed to take down the Magneton's health to the red with 2 Psybeams, but the Magneton finally pulled through its confusion and killed Psycho with a Volt Switch. Rest well, Psycho, your services will be remembered. Enemy was called out with hopes of finishing this fight. She got hit with a Supersonic, but thankfully she fought through it and pulled off confusion. We barely got through the Watson fight, losing Psycho in the process. Psycho went to heaven, where she would rest for the rest of her life. We made our way north to Fall Arbor and learned that Professor Cosmo is in trouble. But before we could help the professor, we caught ourselves a Lunatone, which was named Moonatone. As Moonatone finishes up this fight, FYI I did Super Train Moonatone as well. I also went through the first stage of Pokemon Ami, only to get the stage where we get extra EXP. However, this turned out quite poorly as it didn't really help me in the long run. The Pokemon gained EXP too fast and I had less chances to battle with them. In any case, after taking the cable car up Mount Chimney, we went through the grunts and prepared ourselves for the first battle with Archie. Enemy led the battle against Archie's Mightyena and was able to hit a Draining Kiss after being confused by a Swagger. Archie's Sharpedo came out next and Enemy's Draining Kiss was able to take it out in one go as well. Last was his Golbat, who hit first with an Air Cutter. It didn't deal too much damage, and Enemy's Confusion damaged the Golbat pretty nicely. I didn't want to take any chances, so I switched to Moonatone and took out the bat with a Rock Slide in the next turn. In conclusion of the battle, Archie was getting ready to unleash his full power, but he was interrupted by more important events. He left us with a meteorite and we were able to move on with our lives. At the Jagged Pass, we met our next encounter, Spoink. We successfully caught him and named him Porco. Shortly after in Lava Ridge, we snatched a Wynaut egg from the old lady near the hot springs. Let's talk about Porco the Spoink for a bit. I've never used Spoink and never had I really the interest to use one. So I sent him out in this battle with Flannery with the intention of him being a cannon fodder, but this battle really surprised me. Porco was fast and had good special attack stats. He pretty much carried this fight, being able to force his way to victory with Psybeams. He took out the Slugma and Torkoal with no real struggle, and even hit a critical hit on a Numel for the one-shot. With this, we got the Heat Badge and the Go Goggles, meaning we could head to the desert for our next encounter. We caught a Baltoy and gave it Cleo as its name. After a nice stroll with May back to Petalburg, Cleo underwent some super training. Not long after, Enemy finally evolved into her final female form, a Gardevoir. And after working out our calf muscles in a long bike ride around Rustboro, the egg finally hatched into a Wynaut. She was named Countero. She was made to play with balls in the super training, much like her comrades. Next, I experienced the most painful grinding session for Countero, but she was finally able to evolve into a Wobbuffet. She's got the little lipstick too. Pretty. Also, Cleo learned Vegeta's ultimate self-sacrifice move. Time to face our father in battle. He sent out his Slacking first and I sent out Enemy. One of the things that I didn't take into account going into this battle was Enemy's ability, Trace. Enemy traced Slacking's Truant, meaning Enemy will have to loaf around after every other turn. I chose Psychic as the first move, and it did decent enough damage, but not enough to one-shot the Slacking. The Slacking used a Yawn, and in the next turn our father immediately healed. Enemy went to sleep, but a well-prepared Chesto Berry woke it right back up. A second Psychic took it back down to the red, but again, not enough to kill it. During Enemy's Truant turn, the Slacking used an Encore, which is not the worst of moves to get. Right after, Enemy ended the Slacking with Psychic. For the Vigoroth, I switched to Countero, who was immediately hit with Retaliate. It didn't do too much, and Countero just spent the rest of the match using counters. 2 attacking moves later, the Vigoroth tasted his own medicine and kicked the bucket. The last Slacking then came out, so I switched back to Enemy, who traced Slacking's Truant again, creating a weird situation where only one Pokemon can attack at one time. Enemy got hit by a Chip Away, which did a lot of damage, but thankfully she lived. She ended the battle right after with a Psychic. We beat our father and we were insulted once more. I didn't have any Pokemon to use Surf on, so I caught Disposable the Zigzagoon right next to Morphil. Soon after, Porco achieved his final form, a Grumpig. We met Steven and had to save a Latias from Team Aqua, and were gifted a Latias. She wouldn't be used, so she was named Can't Use. Right outside Fortree, Porco ended things pretty quickly with Aqua admin Shelly. Can't use the cast form, but I took the Mystic Water. And time for another May fight. She sent out her Shroomish first, and I led Enemy. The Shroomish was taken out with one Psychic. When the Slugma came out, I took the time to set up a Calm Mind since the Slugma doesn't really pose a threat to Enemy. The Slugma used Ancient Power, but it barely did anything. One Psychic later, the Slugma was down. For the Marshtomp, I actually misclicked. I wanted to go for Magical Leaf, but hit Confusion instead. Thankfully, the Marshtomp went for a Protect, so I didn't look too stupid. Next turn, it was dead to a proper Magical Leaf. Moving on. On the bridge east of Fortree, we ran away from a Kecleon in battle, and Steven gifted us a bunch of stuff that we can't use. I hate to be that guy, but what the hell is Winona doing? Anyway, while Winona does her contemporary dance piece, we started the battle. She sent out her Swallow first, so Enemy leads the dance again. The Swallow was faster, damaging Enemy with an aerial ace. I opted for a Charge Beam, and it surprisingly one-shot at the Swallow, raising Enemy's special attack stat in the process. Winona sent out her Skarmory next, but it was outsped by Enemy and was taken down with one Charge Beam as well. Her feared Altaria was next, and it was taken out in one shot as well with a Draining Kiss. The Pelipper, Charge Beam. Honestly, the Fairy type edition for God of War takes away quite a lot of challenge in this game. If I were to do this in Emerald, this would have been a lot harder. Anyway, Cleo evolved into a Claydol shortly after the gym. Over at Lily Cove, we had the last rival battle of the run. May sent out her Swallow first, and I led Enemy yet again. I used the Calm Mind while her Swallow stacked 2 double teams. Enemy would then miss 3 Psychics while tanking aerial aces. I was getting really worried, but Enemy was finally able to hit a Psychic, which took out the bird in one hit. The reason I used Calm Mind was for the Swampert, which came out next. With the newly taught Grass Knot, Enemy took out the Mudfish Pokemon in one go. May's Macargo was up next, and I decided to just keep Enemy in the battle and spam Draining Kiss. Enemy was able to regain her health, and she took down the Macargo in the process. When the Breloom came out, it was just a matter of one Psychic. May couldn't take the loss, so she retired from battling and went back home to Little Root. The next encounter was up on Mount Pyre, a Meditite. He was caught rather easily and was named Champo. We went to the Safari Zone next, and we were able to catch Xatu, which was named Zato. Then we had to cycle more, you guessed it, plot. We got the red orb from Mount Pyre, saw the submarine being stolen from Slateport Harbor, and cleaned up Team Aqua hideout. Oh, and while all of this was going on, Champo evolved into a Medicham. Quite eager for our last encounter, I quickly made my way to Moss Deep and obtained the Super Rod. At this point I was quite tired, but I thought I'd just catch the next possible encounter first, then go to sleep. But I was dead wrong. It took me about 3 hours to find a Staryu, and it was absolutely infuriating. I saw about 300 Whalmers before finally fishing a Staryu out. The sun went down in real life and in the game while I was looking for this godforsaken Staryu. Anyway, we caught it and named it Starro. To evolve Staryu, I needed a Water Stone, so I obtained one from the Super Training extra levels. After learning Psychic at level 42, I applied the Water Stone and Starro evolved into a Starmie. For the next gym, Tate and Liza in this game are a disappointment, really. They went from this badass pair with a challenging lineup to this feeble gym with only a Lunatone and a Solrock. My personal feelings aside, I sent out Starro and Porco for this battle. Porco used Shadow Ball on the Solrock and Starro used Surf. It was over in one turn, since Starro landed a critical on the Lunatone. You twins used to be so good. This was really sad. After the gym, the Hoenn region experienced more plot, and Steven gave us the Dive HM and some scuba gear. To make things a bit easier for myself, I went to Sutopolis first to get Fly registered and got the Brick Break TM. I also went to Pacific Lockdown to register it for Fly, but it turned out I never needed to come back here. I made a short trip to Sea Mauville and looted the storage for all the money and, more importantly, the Ice Beam TM. This was my backup move for Drake in case things go wrong. At the Seafloor Cavern, we caught up to Archie, who had apparently beaten Maxie in a Pokemon battle. To stop Archie from advancing the plot, we had to challenge him to a Pokemon battle one last time. Enemy led the battle once more, facing off with Archie's Mightyena. Honestly, the higher leveled Enemy was, the easier the battles got. Enemy decimated Archie's Mightyena with a Dazzling Gleam, leaving no chance for the pupper. Archie's Muck was next, but it was also taken down very swiftly with a Psychic. The Crobat came after, but it wasted its turn with a Mean Look. One Psychic later, it was dead. Finally, Archie Sharpedo was out and it immediately Mega Evolved, the first we've seen in this run. It used a crunch which took down Enmy's health to orange. I'm not gonna lie, this almost had me screaming. But again, even with a Mega Evolution, it went down to 1 Dazzling Gleam. It must have been all that defense EV I trained for in the beginning for Roxanne. Archie, being the stubborn guy that he is, went and awakened Kyogre anyway. The Kyogre blew bubbles onto the surface and went away somewhere after activating his ability. Since we already registered Sootopolis, getting there was pretty easy. We made our way to the Cave of Origin where we ran into Steven and this stud of a specimen, Wallace. Look at that sly smile of his. We slowly made our way to the cave and May caught up with us at the bridge where she insulted us first thing after she met us. We went down the cave, met Kyogre again and rode its back. It stared us down as it activated its primal reversion and challenged us to a mighty showdown, one for the ages. Of course, it got Master Balled. Welcome to my box, my ogre. Hoenn region got all twinkly and everyone was relieved. In the midst of it all, we watched Shelly confess his love to Archie where she got absolutely friend-zoned. May told us to take it easy for a while, but there is absolutely no time to waste as my hard disk space is running out when I was recording. We headed back to Mauville where we helped Watson push a button on a supercomputer and receive the Thunderbolt TM. We were also insulted by an elevator. After that, we flew back to Sootopolis and made quick work of Wallace's ice puzzle. We challenged this sparkly guy to a battle for the final gym badge, and he keeps leering at me. I feel violated. That's even more violating. Wallace let love this, so I sent out Enmy first. Again. Enmy was confused due to a sweet kiss, but still managed to stack 1 Calm Mind. After that, Enmy was hit by a Water Pulse and managed to hit herself in her confusion. 2 turns in a row. This was turning out to be an absolute nightmare, so I went for a Thunderbolt, and she hit herself again. I took one final risk and tried for a Thunderbolt again. If this doesn't hit, I'm switching her out. Enmy was hit by a Water Pulse again and was finally able to hit a Thunderbolt. The stupid Love Disc went down in 1 hit. Surprisingly, Wallace sent out his Milotic next. No matter, the boosted Thunderbolt took it down in 1 hit. The Wish Cache was next and 1 Grass Knot was all it took. Wallace sent out a Celio next, so I switched to Champo, who took no damage on the switch in. Champo used Brick Break to knock out the Big Seal. Last was Wallace's Seeking, and I stayed with Champo and opted for a Bulk Up. Champo was hit by a Waterfall, which scored a critical hit. I didn't want to take any chances, so I switched Champo out for Starro. Realizing I haven't taught Starro Thunderbolt, my only option was just Psychic. Thankfully, 2 Psychics later, the Seeking was finally out. We got the final gym badge, finally qualifying for the Pokemon League. After this, we went for a quick trip to Professor Birch's lab, upgrading our Pokédex to the National Dex. I had the option to catch 2 more encounters for the team, but decided it wasn't really worth it. I felt this team was strong enough to finish the game. Our final obstacle before the Pokemon League was good old Wally. He waited for us at this flowery patch in Victory Road where he challenged us one more time to prove his worth to himself. I led with Enmy again, and I opted for the cheesy way out. I stacked 2 Calm Minds as his Altaria chips away with Aerial Aces. In the next turn, Enemy finally went for the Dazzling Gleam after tanking another Aerial Ace hit, ending the Dragon Bird's life. Next was Wally's Magneton, which was hit by Psychic. It held on, having Sturdy as its ability. Wally hits back with a Discharge, taking Enemy's health to orange. The next turn, it was an easy finish for Enemy. Wally's 2 next Pokemon, his Roselia and Delcatty, was easily taken care of by the powered up Psychics. Last was his Gallade, who went for a Mega Evolution. I took a big gamble here as I kept Enemy on and went for another Dazzling Gleam. If that Gallade had been faster, I think I would have had a very hard time finishing this run. Wally tried his best, but his best just wasn't good enough. He gave us a Mega Stone as I held back the urge to throw it back at him. So here we are at Evergrande City, ready to kick things up in the Pokemon League. And here's my team for the Elite Four. We've got Zato the Zatu, Champo the Medicham, Cleo the Claydol, Starro the Starmie, Porco the Grumpig, and finally, Enemy the Gardevoir. We entered the league gates and found ourselves facing Sydney, the Dark-type Elite Four. One thing that wasn't in the original Hoenn games is the Fairy typing, and I've got one of those in my party. Sydney is a Dark-type trainer and I've got a Fairy-type sweeper, so... With Enemy only getting hit by a Fake Out from Sydney's Shiftry, we moved on to the next Elite Four after healing up. Next up was Phoebe, the Ghost-type Elite Four. I led with Porco because for some reason I still kind of tricked myself into thinking that Psychic types are super effective against Ghost types. Nevertheless, Porco took out the Dusclops, who killed himself with a curse after getting hit with Psychic. When Phoebe sent out her Sableye, I switched to, you guessed it, Enmi, who was faked out in the switch-in. Next turn, Enmi one-shotted the Sableye with Dazzling Gleam. The Banette was up next and Enmi used a Calm Mind while the Banette used Spite. In the next turn, one Psychic down to Ghost type. For the next Banette, Enmi stacked another Calm Mind while the Banette misses his Toxic. One Psychic later, it was dead. The big boy Dusknoir came out for formalities only as it died to one Psychic as well. Glacia was next, and this time I properly chose my first Pokemon. Porco led the battle again, setting a Calm Mind first as the Glally used the Light Screen. Next, Porco tanked an Ice Shard as he stacks another Calm Mind. Since Porco's only received minimal damage, I stacked another Calm Mind for a good measure. Finally, I went for a Power Gem, which failed to kill it in one go. The Glally hit back with a crunch, but Porco's Colbur Berry decreased the damage exponentially. After this, Porco hit another Power Gem, which took it out completely as the Light Screen wore off. Glacia sent out her Frostlass next, which died to a Power Gem. Her other Frostlass came out for revenge, but it also died to a Power Gem. The big boy Walrein came out, but it also died to a Power Gem. The last Glalie was sent out and was able to survive with Protect. Alas, it also died to a Power Gem. This Grumpig is actually quite good now that I've gotten the chance to use it. Next up was the strongest Elite Four, the Dragon Trainer Drake. Drake sent out his Altaria first as I lead Enmi yet again. Enmi sets up a Calm Mind while the Altaria sets up a Cotton Guard. In the next turn, Dazzling Gleam ended the Altaria very quickly. Somehow, Enmi was faster than Drake's Flygon and ended the battle in one shot as well. And the same thing happened with the subsequent Flygon. Drake sent out his Kingdra and it also couldn't take the fabulousness of Enmi. Last was Drake's Salamence, who was able to hit a crunch first to no avail. It received a dose of Dazzling Gleam, which ended its aerial superiority. The Fairy type introduction really messed up the difficulty in this game. But we'll take our victory and move on. Here we are at the end of the road, ready to face the man we met in some cave somewhere at some point in time because of his dad. After a bit of talking, the match finally started. I led Starro as Steven led Skarmory. Starro shot out a Thunderbolt, which took down Skarmory's health to red. Starro tanked an Aerial Ace and Steven opted to heal his Skarmory. Right after the heal, Starro was able to finish things off with 2 Thunderbolts. Steven sent out his Armaldo next, which died instantly to a Surf. His Cradily was next, and I stupidly chose Ice Beam, hoping it would one-shot it. It didn't, and I stared in horror as it went for a Giga Drain. Thankfully, Starro was able to fight through the pain. I immediately switched to Champo, who tanked a Sludge Bomb on the switch-in. I opted for a Brick Break next, which was able to kill the Cradily. Steven sent out his Aggron, and Champo's Brick Break hit, but it lived on with Sturdy. The Aggron hit back with Iron Tail, which left Champo with just a sliver of health. Steven went for a heal and Champo immediately rushed in with Brick Break, taking the HP down to 1 again. Next turn, the Aggron finally went down. Steven sent out his Claydol next, and I was at a loss here. Champo definitely wouldn't be able to take down the Claydol, and I need the fresh turn. So, I told Champo to contribute his last move of the game, a high jump kick. Of course, Champo didn't want to do that properly and killed himself. Rest well, buddy, I guess you did alright. Starro went back out and one-shotted the Claydol with a Surf. And finally, Steven sends out his ace, Metagross. Here, I was again pondering of whether to switch Starro out or not, hence why I was looking at the summary of my other Pokemon. Ultimately, I decided to sack Starro, but I pressed switch by complete accident. Of all the time for this to happen, it happened at the champion fight at the most problematic Pokemon. So, Porco was sent out by accident and Metagross's Giga Impact left Porco with 2 HP. Of course, I could have made a switch here, but I'm dumb, so I went for a Psychic. I had no idea why. Down goes Porco, my unexpected ace. Rest well, buddy. I sent out Starro next in hopes to whittle some damage, but it died pretty quickly to a Bullet Punch. Finally, I settled with Cleo, who I equipped with Soft Sand just for this moment. I chose Earth Power as the Metagross hit with a Giga Impact, and thankfully Cleo was able to hold on and live. Cleo hit the first Earth Power to red and killed the damn Metagross while it was recharging. The champion battle is over, and we have successfully taken over the seat of the champion. May and Professor Birch caught on as we celebrate the end of the run. As I watched the credits, I was once again reminded of why I love the Pokemon series so much. When I first played it as a kid, it thoroughly visualizes the feeling of leaving home in search of an adventure, meeting new people and forming connections, overcoming adversity, and at the end of it all, we'll return home where we finally can meet our loved ones and tell our stories, and perhaps pass on our legacy to our next of kin and watch them grow up as they embark on their own journeys. The credit scene ends as Maniac and May both meet up again once more, where they both started their adventures, as the game fades to black and ends. Wait, What the fuck? Does this mean if I fail this battle, the run is over? As I scrambled back to my controller, I switched Starro out since Starro was supposed to be dead. I switched for Enemy, which was hit by Swellow's U-turn on the switch-in. Enemy promptly disposes of May's Breloom with a Psychic, and her Swellow came back out. Enemy was hit by a Steel Wing, which didn't do too much despite being super effective. The Swellow was taken out by a Thunderbolt. Came May's Raichu, I switched for Cleo, the Metagross killer. The Raichu set up a light screen, but it didn't really work against Cleo's Earth Power as it went down in one shot, and so did the Macargo. May sent out her Swampert last, and I switched to Zato. Her Swampert Mega Evolved and hit Sato with a Muddy Water, which did a nice chunk. Zato was able to hit 2 Psychics before being ended by Swampert's Rock Slide. May you go to heaven, Zato. I sent out Enemy one last time, and she ended the fight with a Psychic. So, Maniac's adventure ends for real this time, as he was insulted one last time. As we walked with May and pondered on the game's life philosophy once more, we were greeted by the end screen.